can do a quick show and tell and review of Churchtown Road, which is up in Quarryville, New York. It's a primary home for a family that actually lives currently in an old farmhouse on the same property. And one of the reasons this project kicked off and kind of kicked off with a lot of urgency was the client was sort of pushed out of their farmhouse because of black mold and started renting down the road and kind of got into this spot where they felt like we just need a new and modern and dry home as soon as possible. So we started talking about this project with two pieces. One, them saying, hey, we already have a lot of land. How can we, rather than having to go out and source a new piece of land, maybe there's somewhere we could build a new house on our existing farm. And with a lot of pressure around the speed, getting to entitlement, putting together the build team, and starting to develop the project. Let's kind of start with where this is. So Churchtown Road, it's in Quarryville, up in Columbia County, New York. Zooming way out from seeing Long Island and the Great Lakes and the same view. There's the small white yellow dot of their property. So you can see you've got what Churchtown Road bisecting their property, big kind of hillside on the one side that's wooded. The other side is farm and meadow. But this is actually five contiguous lots, or five kind of clustered lots, where the client's existing home is on the road. And then they had these other parcels. So really the first part of this project was determining which of these contiguous lots we would use to develop the house. And all of them had their drawbacks and benefits, but we were focused primarily on E because it had some road frontage. It was also kind of the easiest to imagine, and B that had a really beautiful isolated kind of meadow, but had a long driveway coming off of the road. So one of the first meetings we had on site was about evaluating each of these parcels and thinking about the relative groundwork costs between them and also just the experience of being on them. Now, remember, we're kind of looking at these through the lens of we need a house now because we're currently pushed out of our primary home. So the client's early thinking was about what is going to be the fastest. Once getting on site and seeing that they had like 100 acres and some really beautiful isolated meadow spaces, kind of pushed against the easiest lot, which would have been looking here, E, with the road frontage. You could kind of build a driveway. There's power right on the road. That would have been kind of the fastest to go. But the best setting for the experience that they had in mind for their life going forward and forever going forward was back here at B, where it really feels like you're sort of off the road, back in a field with kind of the swaying grasses and ridge line in the distance. And so the question became like, what would the time be to get a driveway there? And would the cost of that driveway be prohibitive? So one of the very, very first things that we did after looking at these two parcels was get an excavator out there, measure out this distance and try to figure out what would a 1,090-foot driveway be and how soon could it start that we could have access back to this rear meadow.
There was a potential benefit at that spot too, where there was a bit of a partial like access driveway and an existing electrical pole kind of back in that location too. So wasn't as easy as like lot E to immediately develop, but there were a couple of other like benefits to it that didn't make it as cost prohibitive.
From the get-go, sort of imagining an L-shaped home, the first pass at modifying the big L for this parcel kept a lot of the dimensions in place. So it started to get very long, very sort of stretched out. But here we're kind of diagramming the program requirements and taking the big L standard kind of out of the box and adding a fourth bedroom, looking at kind of railroading a lot of the spaces. But this got us into a spot where we're kind of blocking out the program requirements and thinking about what the square footage of this overall place would be very, very quickly and started placing the big L down. But a lot of the ideas in the resulting house are already in place here, like the covered porch. It feels like, to me, this sort of bringing in elements that feel more contextual to the location, a little bit more like a farmhouse, a little bit less like a sort of kind of pure minimalist Scandinavian house, has the same components of our standards, but brings in vernacular elements that you would see in that part of Columbia County. One thing I noticed too is that we had signed up with them in as a client in February or so. This is in March, and we're sort of have a site. We blocked out the site location, a pretty far along design almost immediately. And it's one of the first projects I'd say that we're really putting into practice the boundaries of how we could modify a standard quickly and say, hey, like the goal here is speed for the client. Let's really lean on
Mhm.
like how do we utilize these standards to get to the answer quickly and entitle the project quickly, get it moving in construction, even if there might be design shifts that happen later, but to get the enough of the project recorded at high enough fidelity that we could get a contractor on, that we get financing organized, that we could get project entitled and break ground. Here we are basically the next season in the snow, trying to push things along as quickly as possible, doing initial excavation for foundation in the dead of winter.
That was like November. So it's like 7 months after we first signed on their scope of work. We're already breaking ground. Whole series of things that happen need to get there, but that's sort of like a really accelerated timeline we're able to hit.
So at this point, we have the site location, have a pretty good understanding of the house layout. One of the really important considerations, both on pricing and how the house would sit on the landscape, was trying to choose what the kind of 0 point was going to be in the elevation. And that would kind of determine how much of the, would you step up into the house? Would you come in at grade? Would there be a lot of the foundation showing? Where should there be foundation showing? Because we wanted to make a basement that housed a partial basement that housed mechanicals. So a lot of that kind of came through in this study where you can see our point cloud of like LiDAR data and starting to place the real house down and seeing where the foundation sat above or below
Mhm.
the ground plane.
I'll add into this too, Wayne, that a big consideration for this client was doing a slab on grade house and not having a basement because of the issues they were having in their previous house with moisture and mold in the basement. So they're really set on doing slab on grade, which always looks really great, and it's really easy to execute like on a flat site. But when you have a more meadowy site, like undulating site, looks really picturesque back there. You can get into issues with the foundation where you're retaining earth from the slab on grade if you have too much foundation exposed. So part of these studies was really a lot of coordination with the general contractor and the structural engineer about how do we design, right? Like how do we design the footings and the foundation in as cost effective way as possible while still hitting the design intent. And overall, like at the very beginning, our foundations were costing around $260,000 for this whole project. And in the end, we basically cut that cost in half with the final design of that foundation without really compromising anything from how this thing looked, which was a really great accomplishment for this one too.
Was that achieved, Joe, being like really particular about where you placed it, or did you guys come up with a good regrading strategy?
Both. So
Mhm.
it started with how we were placing it to minimize the amount of like retaining that needed to happen. And then being smart with like the grading after that, just to make sure we have less locations where the foundation walls are acting as retaining walls and really are just
Mhm.
more bearing walls. But
Gotcha.
primarily with how it was placed first.
Joe, maybe you could talk through a little bit about using the LiDAR scan to be able to determine
Yeah.
to make some of these determinations, way before ground broke and be able to put some like kind of value engineering the concrete cost before any concrete was anywhere near site.
Yeah, so lidar is awesome for those of you who aren't like familiar with it. Like, it creates a point cloud, which basically means like there's a laser that's scanning the topography, and you get the exact replication of that topography within our 3D modeling. So we're able to link that in with our building model and rotate the building, move the building up and down to kind of like do these diagrammatic type of studies to see like where the ground is overlapping with the foundation, how deep we need to build the foundation, when it is in a retaining condition or not in that. So having the exact topography, we can just recreate all that in digital space, which is really great. And also look at how that's impacting like the aesthetic look of the project as well. And how does it look like when you're approaching the building from far away? Does it still look natural to the landscape, or does it look like, oh no, they kind of plopped this in and they had to mound up a bunch of hills to kind of like make this thing kind of work? We're really able to balance all those things, like make it look like it's working really naturally with the landscape, which also helps us make sure we're being smart on the cost of the foundation. So those things work hand in hand, like being able to think about the aesthetics and the cost. Really are one and the same thing.
Joe, real quick, was the general contractor on board at this point or not quite?
Yeah, they were. We linked this project with one of like our preferred builders, which is Dynamism Builders, who work on a lot of our projects in the area. We brought them on very early, like even before like these, like kind of after like our first or second design meeting. We had them on board just so they're familiar with this conversations we're having with the clients, what's important with the clients, that we can have them ready to go with pricing as soon as we're ready to pull the trigger, which, yeah, helped us to have these type of studies that are really, really informed with real pricing and hit that like 7 month period of breaking ground from start of signing the scope of work.
Yeah,
Pretty amazing. I mean, just to kind of be making $100,000 decisions within the like second or third design meeting is
Yep.
pretty amazing.
yeah, these would have otherwise been pure design decisions and aesthetic decisions, and wouldn't have had all that much kind of guidance on the financial side without having the contractor on board, that they're giving a little bit of the kind of takeoffs on the concrete and helping to inform some of these dollar sign figures. Then that kind of switched into actually breaking ground. And now really just kind of breeze through photos from site visits through the months as we've been going. This is maybe like the second or third day of excavation. You can see the formwork following the
Mhm.
topo here. Good amount of rock on this site as well that kind of chipped away at. But I think one of the things that was incredibly important was retaining all of the mature trees that were already on site. So while this is a heavy, pretty heavy excavation on this site, the end result of this project had to be kind of modern homes sitting naturally in the field, and feel like it had always been there, that the ground was never disturbed, and somehow the house kind of grew up from the dirt and up rather than us kind of tearing it apart and then trying to restore it. So there's some really kind of fascinating spaces here. And one of my favorites is loft. It's really kind of a second floor on either side on the public bar of the house. Joe, you want to just describe what's going on here?
Yeah, so you'll probably see this when we look at some of the images from the exterior as well. But we made the call sort of on the larger, like the public bar that you're talking about here. It's like the living, kitchen, dining, sort of a guest suite for in-laws to stay that's separate from the rest of the bedrooms. To make this bar wider than sort of our typical standard. So it's like 22 feet wide and
Here, I'll go to an exterior so we can see that difference in.
yeah, so we made that a little bit wider. So the one on the volume we see on the left is sort of like where all the bedroom wings are. That's like our typical width of like a 16-foot interior. The other volume, but sort of behind the porch, is about 22 feet wide, and we raised up the roof line a few feet, but we increased the width and raised the roof line to get kind of a true like almost a hidden second story in that loft that's fully occupiable with office, a den, and a really great kind of like library and reading nook that's overlooking the living room below. So just those couple of tweaks of making the building a little bit wider, a little bit taller, gave like an extra, I don't know, like almost 1,000 square feet of space. That's kind of like free space to this house, which is really cool. And that's a lot of really great functionality to the living side of it. There's skylights in there, so it's got a lot of great natural light that also serves the living room and the dining room below. Yeah, good private spaces for an office on one side and like a den on the other side for the kids.
Two nice moments here related to the foundation conversation, that you kind of enter the house in between the two volumes at grade, come through the house, and if you were to walk into this bedroom wing and then up to the primary suite, all of a sudden you're kind of like in this treehouse setting, that you're sort of 5 or 6 feet above the landscape, able to look across the entirety of the meadow, but have on the inside haven't kind of gone up or down any level, but the house just placed in a way that your experience to the relationship with the outside landscape is completely changed. And then the other, looking on this side, here you can see this kind of partial foundation space dug out, or basement space. And Joe, all of our mechanicals are here, or some?
Yeah, all the mechanicals are there. So we did we did geothermal on this site. So all the geothermal goes right into that mechanical room. Radiant floors throughout. So all like the geothermal heating is located in there. Like water heaters located in there. Sort of a good central spot. That bought a lot of square footage too. That's like I don't know, 250, 300 square foot room that otherwise we would have needed that space on the ground floor, which is like the size of a bedroom and a bathroom. So we're able to be like with that loft move and that mechanical basement move, we were able to be a lot more efficient with the space. It's like the grade was already falling off there. We had like enough height for a basement. So it just made a lot of sense to make that mechanical room right there. It's also the mechanical room is sort of centered under the bathrooms that are serving that bedroom wing, and it's a straight shot right to the kitchen, just like not even like 40 feet to the right of it. So it's like a great central spot where we're able to consolidate where those mechanical rooms are going.
I think this is from our most recent site visit, where you can see a little bit more of the interior experience here. So how does that shift in the volumes and the public bar getting wider and a little bit taller? What kind of space does that afford us? So looking here, in a full staircase up into this loft, true second floor hybrid space where we got this sort of activated catwalk that is sort of a pretty fun and exciting play space. And then on either side, connected by that catwalk, we've got these are two work from home spaces, or what is the program of
Yeah,
these?
one office and the other is a den. So like TV, big couches, hangout space for the kids will be in the den. So the living room is more of like a family conversation place. It's not like where you're watching TV or anything like that. That kind of has its own separate spot.
Here we're also seeing a 4-panel sliding door system. See some pretty
Is
heavy
that
duty
a Anderson multi-guider?
around this.
Yeah, it is.
Nice.
It's like 20 feet wide,
They do it on both sides or just the one side?
just the one side.
Nice. Way to invest in like one moment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Joe, I'll click through these. You want to tell us what we're seeing?
Yeah, so this is if you don't mind going back one way into like where that big door is. That's like this is kind of a view from where the kitchen is going to be. So it'll be like kitchen, dining, then the living room. So like the view off to the right, that big door like opens up underneath the porch and out to the meadow, which is like just a beautiful view. There's like wildflowers that grow in there, like pretty tall grasses that grow in there in the spring and summertime. So it's be like really, really picturesque. And then like straight through at the very end of that space is like where the guest bedroom is going to be through there. Yep. But like with a lot of Huts projects, you see that here, you see this in the next photo, like paying attention to the view lines and the sight lines down the end of the hallways. Like we're not dead ending in a space, but we're opening up the view. But this view here is sort of in the bedroom wing of the house where there's two kids' rooms, the primary suite, obviously with like the primary bathroom and another bath for the kids as well. This is back in the living room. You see that big door sort of on your left. At the end of that space is where the kitchen's going to be. You have like this nice moment underneath like that catwalk above, like where the space kind of compresses, which really emphasizes like the view going out to the meadow through that door. And to the right is like this kind of like 2.5-story space underneath that loft where there's skylights above. So you get like this tall vertical space with light coming in above, and then you get this really long sort of horizontal or vertical space that really focuses the view out.
Also, just on the structure, all the pre-engineered trusses here, you can see all the chases kind of hidden through. Not going to be any kind of funky soffits or afterthought sort of bump out moments. Really, once the drywall's on and this sort of boxed in, the lines are going to be incredibly clean.
This is sort of like on the approach side of like the living kitchen and dining. There'll be a lot of landscaping that's happening sort of below this, but there's like 2 sliding doors there sort of into the living room and the dining room. There'll be like a small patio out there. You can have your morning coffee if you want to. If you go back one, Wayne, you'll see on the left that there's like an oak tree that's there that was really important to preserve. Like when we're looking at preserving trees on site, like a good rule of thumb is that like the roots kind of extend as far as the canopy of the trees do. So that was sort of like an important like boundary when we were thinking about the site planning and the foundation, that we couldn't like encroach too much on that side. So I kind of set like one side boundary that we were sort of pivoting off of. It looks really great right here. So really glad we're able to keep that. This is where the front door is going to be, kind of straight through. And there's like, yeah, an 8 foot by 8 foot piece of glass there, and the same sort of beyond that. So the view straight through to the meadow through there. There's actually going to be 3 structures on this site. So this is an artist studio that's sort of like the opposite way from like that front door we were just looking at, that kind of meanders through a different type of meadow. It's a little bit more hilly, kind of perched up on the hill from the main house. Mechanical room.
You have any interior photos of the studio?
Studio's like, was a cool design study that like you remember, Katie, because you helped out on it. It was really like our client is a painter, and what was really important for the studio was the quality of light. And so the studio is located like pure sort of solar north. So that all of there's like a big side of like one of the walls is all windows, like that you see right there, like that's facing solar north. So you get all kinds of great like indirect natural light coming through there. You're not getting any direct light coming through windows that's causing glare or causing different colors, to sort of like happen across the canvases as you're painting, or fading to happen across like artwork if it's hung on the walls. So that was like really a really cool thing to kind of work on and figure out. But it's just like kind of one big space with a small storage space on the side, and I can't wait to see this one finish. I think it's gonna be pretty magical.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there's a wall of windows in the studio.
That looks great.
You can kind of tell already, they don't have the windows in, it's just kind of plastic on it, but you can already tell like the quality of this like direct light that's going to fully illuminate the space.
So what is the total size of the house and the studio on this project?
I think the house with the loft is around 3,200 square feet. The studio is like right around 450. Then there'll be a 2-car garage as well.
And coming up, what on the exterior, what kind of finish will we see?
Yeah, we're kind of going through that process right now of making our final selection, but it's going to be a natural wood, thermally treated like hemlock or pine. It's going to be horizontal siding, or but it's going to be a really great natural wood. So you have like this natural wood, you have the matte gray of the roof, black of the windows. To be look pretty good. And the siding will sort of weather over time, so it'll sort of gray out as well. So like in 5 to 10 years, you'd have this really cool kind of like gray and black palette.
Quite far along here, and it's right in time that the entirety of the exterior will be near complete, and all of the work can move inside for the winter. And what is the current anticipated completion date?
I think we're targeting sort of April to be all done. It could go a little bit faster than that. I think that's sort of like the conservative estimate. Studio done as soon as possible so our client can move in there and start painting. She's pretty excited about that.
Great. This is Churchtown Road in Craryville, and a bigger house and a more complex house than a lot of our standards show. But I think what's, like we said in the beginning, what's really fascinating about it is that it started directly with the big L, and then starting to push and pull and manipulate it according to the sort of 3 criteria that we're always looking at, that the standards kind of become unique based on the lot, on the client's lifestyle, and on their budget. And this house is no different, that it starts from that DNA of the standards, but then really became its own thing and its own compound that I think is really perfectly suited to the kind of unique requirements of this client.